You are listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. Join him as he and his guests discover how businesses thrive in California.
Well, welcome to the Pilgrim on the 405 on this beautiful cloudy day here in Southern California. We have a particularly interesting guest today who's going to talk to us about that tricky thing called marketing. Ian Plumlee is a world expert on how to get what marketing really is supposed to do, which is to generate new leads. It doesn't matter how many awards a marketing agency has. It really matters how many new qualified leads can that marketing effort put into the funnel for the salespeople to qualify and close. So welcome, Ian.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how you got here, Ian.
So I started out my professional journey in web development. That ended up not being my forte. I found out that I enjoy working more with people. I enjoy working with the kind of the nexus, I guess, between people and technology and the content that businesses create to connect with those people. So over the past about 7 years now, I've really been putting a lot of focus into connecting with businesses that need help with generating traffic, and not just generating any traffic, but generating qualified traffic. Folks that are most likely to come to your website, take favorable action to help you accomplish your bottom line. All
right, so companies who want to grow by meeting new people in today's marketplace, that's not just walking around knocking on doors.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
Most people aren't going to knock on the door because they're too busy looking into their computer screen.
Exactly. Or their phone, most likely.
Or a listing on their phone. And plus, there's so much noise about the phone, right? That people have created these moats,
right?
These obstacles, and you sort of have to somehow get that drawbridge to come down, right?
Correct.
So is this an area that you can help businesses with?
Absolutely. So a lot of folks these days have essentially gone blind to the advertising, have gone blind to the what you might call traditional marketing tactics, banner ads, things like that. Most people just tune that stuff out. There are more than a few ad blocking tools on Google Chrome and most popular web browsers. So a lot of people use these things because they just don't want to see that stuff. Unless they're seeking something out intentionally, they don't want to be assailed with thousands and thousands of marketing message every day.
Well, even our brain has ways of dealing with noise, right? It doesn't quite have the ability to turn the noise down, but it can ignore it.
It can choose what to focus on.
And we have technology to help us ignore all of that tsunami of requests for conversation that are coming at us, right?
Right.
Now, so there's something there in my mind when we think about this contest between the people who want to be in touch with new people and the people they want to be in touch with. There's almost like they have two different agenda, right? One is I'm going to get in touch with you, and the other is I'm going to keep you from it.
Right. So
how do you solve that problem?
So retention is a key factor when it comes to any marketing that you're going to do. A lot of people will put their marketing message out there. It's going to attract people. Again, a lot of companies, the struggle that we run into is they don't attract the qualified individuals. So those are the people that you want to focus on because they're the ones that you're going to retain. They're the ones that are going to become raving brand advocates and be in tune with you and in tune with your message and all that. It's challenging to connect with those people if you're not experimenting, if you're not testing out the strategies, and you're not going to where those people are spending their time.
All right. So when you say retention, you're not talking about just retaining my current clients. You're talking about from the very beginning, my intention is to create people who will be retained.
Exactly.
And those are the only people I want to be communicating with.
Right. So it's not to say that you cannot communicate with other people that are not exactly in your target audience. However, when you target people specifically using, say, a strategy like buyer personas, That's going to resonate with the people that you want to connect with. It's going to resonate with the people that you want to bring into your business as a paying customer. By association, you're going to wind up getting some other folks too, but that's, again, that part of that noise that you're talking about. You're going to be bringing those people in. They're going to get what value they need out of your content, and then they're going to move along their way.
So tell me a little bit more about buyer personas.
So buyer personas really is, in my humble opinion, the secret weapon of sorts for marketers these days. It's a way for marketers and for businesses to be very specific and very intentional with who they are creating material for, whether that's a blog post or a video, social media content. Being able to have a very, very clear understanding of who that person is, one person, and it's one person, not a group of people. Having that clear understanding of who that person is going to help you to create content that's going to resonate with that person. It's not a matter of if it will. We know that it's going to resonate with them because we've done the research on them.
Well, when we think about that one person, that buyer persona, would it be safe to say that this is a person who has a problem they want to solve that we can solve?
Yes, absolutely. And that's really part of what the buyer persona is. You can be as detailed as you want, but when it comes down to it, there are some specific things that you do want to be sure to include. For example, demographical information, and another thing that's really critical is what problem are you going to solve for this individual? If you don't provide value to them, if you don't solve a problem for this person, why would they come to you? So creating this persona, understanding who this person is, where they spend their time, where they get their information, what a day in their life looks like, and more important than anything is what that challenge is that you're solving for them.
So demographics are certainly, we've heard about demographics. Anybody has heard about demographics, right? What part of the country are they in? What size are they? What business are they in? What niche are we trying to communicate with? But would buyer persona begin to get into psychographics?
Absolutely, and that's really kind of a newer thing that a lot of marketers are doing in the last probably decade or so. People are starting to look into the psychographic aspects of the buyer persona. It's been around longer than that, but we're just now starting to really kind of integrate that in on a large scale basis. So,
well, I know for me, working for the past 16 years with Sandler training, working with salespeople, many of them come in with the idea that they're going to learn secret sauce here on how to better convince somebody or how to better get somebody to do something that they may or may not want to do. And what we've done in Sandler is to disabuse them, first, of that huge mistake. We're really not trying to convince anybody of anything, right?
Right.
What we're really trying to do is disqualify everybody who doesn't have a problem that they want to solve. And,
right.
and that's, there's going to be a lot of people out there that, well, as we say, we've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince, right?
Sure.
So all of this means that the more precise we can be about how somebody talks who has a problem they want to solve, where they talk, what kinds of things that they do, all of those things contribute to how they might be willing to let the drawbridge down across that moat that they've created to keep all the noise out, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that's, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it really is like a defense mechanism that consumers have built up over ever since the advent of the internet. The speed of information accelerated exponentially with that. So people have put up these defenses so that they're not being, bothered, really. That's really what it comes down to, is that people, by and large, feel bothered, feel that they're being assaulted with these marketing messages. So instead of marketing to somebody to try to sell them something straight off the bat, find the person that you want to sell to, and then establish a relationship with them. And that comes back to the buyer persona, understanding who they are.
All right, I want to interrupt you there for a moment. When we find the person you want to sell to, it seems to me using this word sell is very ambiguous. For some folks, sell means the person I want to convince.
Sure.
versus sell means the person I believe might have the problem that I can help them with.
Right.
And they might want to solve it now. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It's and when I use the term sell, it's like you said, it's a little bit ambiguous, and it can really mean anything.
Right.
I guess a more correct term would be convert.
All right. Well, let's take a little hike back in history.
Sure.
Now, you and I got to know each other coming down the elevator,
Right.
and we were talking about. Tell me that fellow's name that you introduced me to.
Was it Edward Bernays?
Yes. Now, Edward Bernays. Tell us a story about what Edward Bernays did.
Okay. So, excuse me, Edward Bernays, he was really the founder, the godfather, if you will, of modern marketing.
He started all this noise that we're hearing today.
Right,
Go ahead.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so he was Sigmund Freud's, I believe, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here, but he was Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Yes.
And so he ended up getting his hands on a transcript of Sigmund Freud's book. The title escapes me at the moment, but got his hands on this, read through that, and said, hey, this can apply to business. This can apply to me trying to help my clients to sell stuff, to convert people, to, see that that my clients can solve their problems.
You get them to buy more.
Right. Get them to buy more. Get them to become a customer and a loyal customer. And that it was a good thing, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that Edward Bernays really showed that there is some fine kind of ethical lines too that you have to walk with this stuff. There is you can use the power for good or for evil, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting to me that in this modern day and age, there are a lot of businesses that don't really see it. They don't really see it through that lens, I guess. And so that's I think that's a challenge that I take upon myself working with clients, is to help people to kind of shift their perspective, to look at this from, hey, you know what, we have the power to really change the way that people think. We can change the way that they think. We can change the way that they see the world around them, and being able to do that in an ethical manner, and do that in a way that benefits the client and not just the business. This is a symbiotic relationship you're building with people. It's not just a give me your money situation. It's I'm going to provide value to you first. I'm going to give you what I have to give you first. If you choose to become my client, become my customer, great. If not, I hope that you left this relationship better off than you started.
Well, Edward Bernays, one of the results of what his work was for people to begin to repeat the message, right?
Right.
So repeat, and that wound up as radio and television. Then the only people who were able to repeat that were large companies who had major budgets, and we can see almost the kind of cosmic echo of that today with the repeated ads. And sometimes we see ads repeated sequentially for 2 or 3 times at the same time, right?
Right.
But it's that, get that jingle into my head, get that picture into my head, get that message into my head, but it's the same message over and over and over. That, that initially, that was available only to companies that had enough budget to pay for all of that.
That's called a marketing campaign.
Right. And now, with the internet, the do-it-yourself, we can all do that.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's not difficult at all to create a short ad and then push the repeat forever button, send it out every day. And that contributes to the noise.
Exactly.
So how do we deal with that?
So the noise is really one of the big problems, I think, with the internet these days. It's leveled the playing field, which in a lot of ways is great. It's a really positive thing that the internet has been able to come in and say, you know what, large businesses, large corporations, you're not the only ones anymore that can do this stuff. I mean, look at, for example, Red Bull. Look at any one of these major companies that's become a media publisher of sorts. How many competitors do they have that are small brands? They're small.
Well, look at
one or
Monster right out in Corona.
Right.
Right? Monster started off as a small group, but now they dominate.
Huge.
Right.
And the action sports industry and all that, and it's them and Red Bull going at it all the time. And you have, what's the, I was at a convenience store the other day, as a matter of fact, and there was another energy drink that's doing a similar thing. I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but similar thing. They're producing media. They're becoming more of a publishing company than an energy drink. That was their way into the market, and that's powerful,
right? Well, in a real sense, the product or the service becomes an afterthought,
right? Exactly,
because you become the person that I believe will help me solve the problem that before this I thought was impossible to solve.
Right.
So it seems to me now, what I'm beginning to conclude is that many people walk around with a mistaken belief that their problems can't be solved, or they can't be solved in a way that they could afford to do it,
right?
Or they don't really know how to make a decision about it, so they don't trust themselves or anybody around them. So something about that message has to communicate, number one, you can trust me. And this is not, you got to learn how to be authentic, right? If you can fake authenticity, you've got it made.
That's,
right.
This
is real trust. I mean, I believe you will do what you say you will do, or you'll tell me you can't. All right, so a sense of trust. Number two, the belief that there's something new out there that I didn't know about. That, wow, this has the probability, a high probability of being solved. And number two, there's a way that I can afford this. Is that right?
I would say that is, yes. It's it's interesting again, and I think that the internet really was the catalyst for all of this. And the internet has enabled people to compete with these big brands, but to do so in a way that quite literally doesn't cost any money at all. There's when you look at advertising online, there really are two kind of main sides of it: the paid media and the owned media. And there's also earned media and some other types too, but those are really the two big ones that most businesses can reasonably get access to very quickly. Paid media being things like search engine marketing, pay-per-click advertising, social media ads. That again is going to cost money, but really one of the things I've been focusing on a lot recently is content marketing, is creating content that brings people to your brand, and you can do that with nothing more than the investment of your time.
I.e., what are we doing right now?
Exactly.
Right? We are creating content on this radio show that 15 years ago would have cost thousands
of dollars.
And thousands. Oh, it still does. It still does. Oh, this is very powerful, very powerful. But in reality, what's more important is the time that we're spending here than the technology.
Right. Absolutely.
All right.
So it's the information that's being disseminated out to the audience.
That's right. And the fact that we can create that content, preserve it, and distribute it.
Sure. So
we're going to take a break right now and hear from our sponsors, and we come right back and pick up where we left off. You ready?
I'm ready.
Hi, it's time for another tip from Sandler Training. Never ask for the order. Make the prospect give up. Always ask for the order is the salesperson's 11th commandment. You know, the one that just dropped right off the tablets. Never ask for the order goes completely against traditional selling methods. If you don't ask for the order, how will you ever know when the customer is going to buy? Well, think about it. The only person who can really ask for the order is the prospect. Find the prospect's emotional needs first, provide the answers to meet these needs, and you'll discover that the prospect will give up and ask you for the order. And that's another tip from Sandler Training, finding power through reinforcement.
All right, back to Will and his guest.
So here we are, back with the Pilgrim on the 405, and one of the cutting-edge marketers in our world, Ian Plumlee. And Ian and I have been talking about the big change that we're in the midst of seeing, this transition from something that Edward Bernays started back at the turn of the century, which wound up with all the noise we're hearing and the subsequent technology to block the noise. And now, how do we? It's very, very difficult to talk about. How do we make more sales, but how do we find more people who are willing to listen to the possibility that their problems can be solved?
I think a good caveat to that is, how do we provide more value in an area, in a part of the world, the internet, where most stuff doesn't. Quite frankly, most stuff doesn't provide value. It's created for the sake of creating content.
Well, let me test something out with you. I was talking with one of the fellows this morning after a meeting I had, and it seems to me that we're going through a transition where there was a time when people actually believed that we're only together when we're face to face. I mean, this mentality may have started, when people were born and died and never left further than 10 miles from their homes, right? Lots of people.
Sure.
And so being together meant face to face. Now, and then as we got these technologies like telephone, pardon me, I'm on long distance. I mean, it's like this is an ancillary to the real thing, which is being face to face.
Right.
What I'm fascinated with is, as I drove over here this morning, I was on the phone, and something as simple and inexpensive like Zero as Google Hangouts. I was on the phone with one fellow in Ireland and one fellow in Shanghai. We were having a conversation flawlessly. Now, what I'm coming to conclude is that the reality is we are all together at once. All of us are in the same room. We're on the same planet.
We're all connected all the time.
And all we need to do is focus, or whatever you want to call it, tune in, make it's just say, I want to talk to you, Kevin and Michael. We're going to talk now, and we'll talk again next week at this time. And it doesn't matter where they are, as long as we have a time that we can be together with. And now, that's radically different. We're all in the same room at the same time, and there's lots of noise. So it's difficult for us to, number one, find people who have the problems that we are able and willing to solve, and the people who want to hear from us because they don't believe it's possible to solve it, or think it might be too expensive, or they've never been able to trust somebody about solving that problem. So talk to me a little bit about how a marketer might see that kind of transition.
So I think really what it all begins with is building that relationship. As we were saying before the break, it starts with the buyer persona. It starts with understanding who you're talking to. And once you found that person, once you found that ideal customer of yours, that ideal consumer, the next step is to build the relationship. It used to be everything was what we call outbound marketing. It was all, I'm sending a message out into the world, says, hey, here's what I do. There wasn't a whole lot of competition out there. If you were a large brand and you had the money, back in Edward Bernays' days, for example, you could put a message out there, and chances are there wouldn't be a lot of competition against it.
You could convince women that smoking was the greatest thing in the world.
Doctors prefer Camel, right?
Absolutely. What was the other things that some of the other things he did? Doctors do. It was bacon and eggs.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Doctors prefer bacon and eggs. And what do we do now?
The Torches of Freedom, that was the big one.
Torches of Freedom.
Torches of Freedom, that was the big one that he really launched him to the world stage.
Torches of Freedom were women smoking.
Right, walking down the middle of the street doing it.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was just so clever the way that he did it, too, it seemed so organic the way all the ladies came out and joined in this, parade, and it was powerful. Unfortunately, it was for smoking, but it was powerful.
But
the way that he
knew something about how in that environment to make the message. Now that is very different from what we're talking about today.
Right.
Well, let me back up a second. What he did was he picked up on what people wanted, which was somehow the women there wanted more renown, wanted to be seen with the power that they saw men having, and had the
They
opportunity.
wanted to throw off the shackles of the patriarchy of sorts, if you will.
And he got the cigarette. He positioned it as the tool to achieve that.
Right.
Amazing.
And that's what it is. You know, it's the way that you position yourself. It's the way that you position the service you provide. So being able to connect with that customer and then position that offering correctly, you know, is really key to that. Because you can take one product offering, regardless of what that happens to be. We'll take look at Wix, for example, or a website builder platform. GoDaddy has the same thing. GoDaddy has a website builder platform too. Mm-hmm. But they position that as, hey, this is an add-on to the hosting of your domain, not as the service itself. So most people don't know about it. You know, so being able to position that in the way that people look at your service and say, that's what I need. That's what's going to solve my problem. That's when you've won with your message.
Mm-hmm. So it's really, is it placement then? Placement in such a way that the people who believe they have that problem and want to solve it see that, become aware of it, hear about it, feel it? Is that what marketing is about?
In part of it, I would say, yeah. So demand generation is very, very crucial to successful marketing. Being able to get your message out there so that people see that, and not only say that's going to solve my problem, but they look at that and they go, yes, like I need that right now. Like I need to solve my problem right now, and that's what's going to do it for me.
All right. So demand generation, that doesn't mean creating something out there. It means being in a position where people who want to solve the problem right now say something, hold up their hand, make some sort of gesture, right?
Right. And let's not confuse demand generation with lead generation either. Lead generation is bringing people into your company, bringing in the qualified leads, and they're now in your lead funnel. Demand generation is building up the buzz, if you will.
Well, this is not branding, is it?
It could be branded. It could be branded. Look at Edward Bernays again. Back to that the Torches of Freedom example. That wasn't branded, but it was for the cigarette industry, and you know, nobody knew that at the time. Nobody knew anything about what was going on, but none of that was branded.
Nobody knew that the doctors were being paid to talk about bacon and eggs.
Right.
That was the pork industry behind it, right?
Correct.
And the poultry industry.
Right. So being able to get your message out to people using branded methods is great, because that's going to tie your message, it's going to tie your solution for their problem to your brand. It's going to make people look at your brand and say, that brand has what I need, whatever it happens to be. You know, at the same time, Edward Bernays didn't brand any of that stuff. So guerrilla marketing of sorts is always an effective tactic, but you have trouble sometimes tying that to your brand directly.
And of course we're going to have trouble with that, because this is a whole area of expertise that is really changing every day.
Yes.
And that's why I look to you and people like you that I can trust to help me through those thickets.
Right.
All right. Because remember, I mean, I have to remember all the time that a marketing company, when they're talking to me, is always trying to sell me stuff. And it may be stuff that's not going to be very effective for me.
Right.
And when I talk to companies about lead generation, and they say we want to find a marketing company who will help us with lead generation, or we want to find a marketing company to get our message out, what I want them to do is I want them to get into an agreement that says, this is how many qualified leads we want a month or a quarter or a week, and that. Once we know that number, and then ask the company, can you generate that? Will you generate that? Because if you don't, we're going to find somebody who can and will.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's something that I've always lived by, honestly. And everything that I've done within the time that I've been working in marketing, I can't remember who told it to me, but one of the best words of advice I ever received was, if you're not measuring, you're not marketing. If you're not measuring things to see what's effective, to see what's not effective, to see what your return is on the investment that you're putting into different channels, if you don't have those numbers that you can measure success against, you might as well throw that money out the window.
Right. Lay it on the table and burn it.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier. It's a
It
lot
does.
warmer.
It just gets it rid of it. Yeah, a lot faster.
Yeah. Now, so let's talk a little bit about the future. Where do you see yourself and when I say marketing, I'm talking about finding companies and helping companies to get what they want, which in this particular case is generally more qualified leads. So where do you see the future taking you and the industry?
So personally for myself, being a veteran of the Marine Corps, one of the things that I really like to focus on
Hoorah!
Hoorah! One of the things I like to focus on is veteran-oriented and veteran-run and owned businesses. It strikes real close to home for me, because of the fact that they're run by veterans. And a lot of guys coming out of the military, they just don't have the technical savvy that goes into a lot of the things you need to be successful in business. So by virtue of me having, put in the time to learn this stuff, it's been a long, arduous journey for me, but well worth it. Putting in the time to learn that stuff and then being able to take those skills that I've acquired and give back to the veteran community, that's really where I see myself going here in the next, say, 5 or 10 years. Really focusing on that, focusing on teaching veterans, how to market successfully, how to bring those leads in, how to bring in qualified individuals to help their businesses thrive. So that's where I see myself. As far as the industry, it's moving in an interesting direction with the evolving algorithms in the search and the just exponentially expanding number of tools and services and platforms and different things that people can use to express themselves and collect information. It's going to make it very, very challenging for marketers, for businesses in general to really be successful. So as far as the direction of the industry, I think it's going to be beneficial for individual marketers and businesses to be very, very intentional with where you put your money, what you're spending it on, and really becoming aware of what kind of return you're getting from that investment.
When you mention algorithms, what you're really mentioning is robots, right?
Of sorts, yeah.
Well, I mean, this would be a robotic marketer. It's functioning based upon what we told it to do. It
Right.
goes and does it.
Right. And they've got all kinds of machine learning going on within the Google algorithms these days. So I mean, these things are it's Skynet.
Yes.
We're living in the future.
Yes, absolutely. So, talk a little bit about veterans. Now, I think part of when I think of a veteran organization, I think of somebody in that first couple of years transitioning from the military into business. If it's into an existing corporation and they're coming in as an employee or a 1099 or something like that, I understand how that works. I mean, it's some coaching and counseling to help them. They bring a lot of skills to it.
Right.
On the other hand, there are many opportunities for veterans to start their own businesses.
Of course.
And so I tend to get limited by veterans who are startups, 1 to 2 to 3. Now, are you talking about those? Or are you talking about veterans who have established businesses and have 10 to 250 employees?
Well, it could be both, quite honestly. I personally like to help the veterans that are kind of just breaking into that. It's been a passion of mine, working in the startup kind of space, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun. It's so dynamic. It's so interesting. There's always something to learn, especially in this industry. It's changing constantly. So always being on top of that stuff and really being able to use myself as essentially a sounding board for this knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I put in the time to gain this knowledge and to do the reading and all that, and then I understand this stuff, and then I put it out there to these veteran, some nonprofits I work with, 3 specifically right now, and also for-profit businesses. Put that out there and say, hey, you know what? You guys don't need to worry about this stuff. You don't need to worry about learning this because I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to help you to be successful as a veteran, as a fellow veteran. I want to take my experience and put that to work for you.
Well, my personal passion kicks in when people get their businesses to 10 or more employees, up to 250, because here's a whole different set of issues. I mean, they begin hitting the ceiling because in many cases they never learned how to lead, manage, or hold people accountable. And so that is a particular place where I love to be. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about, if not today, sometime, about how to identify and support those those organizations with veterans in them who have begun to hit the ceiling as they grow, because frankly, 50% of businesses fail after the first 5 years, so they're well beyond the startup phase, but because they don't know how to deal with that hitting the ceiling. They don't know that business doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows by a series of evolutions and revolutions. And giving them the kind of tools that are valuable. And, there are 5 simple tools that I can give you. One is simplify. When you come up to a problem, simplify it. And after that, delegate it. Delegate it. Get it off of your plate. Find somebody who wants to do it and is very good at it. And after that, begin to predict, so that we get very good at predicting where we're going to be long-term and where we're going to be short-term, where we're going to be, 10 years from now, where we're going to be a quarter from now, where we're going to be next week. And so after simplifying, delegating, predicting, then systemizing. Come up with a system, not necessary in your startup phase. Everybody's running around with their hair on fire, right? Yeah. Making it happen.
More often than not.
But when you get to a certain stage, when you start having 10, 15, 20, 30 or more employees, then you have to have a system, because you have to be able to share that with them. And then finally, structuring and getting the right people in the right seats. So giving them those 5 tools is the beginning of helping them to get really clear about how to get what they really want from their business. And that's where my passion is. So maybe we can talk about identifying some of those companies to see if they're coming into problems that they want to solve.
Sure, of course. So one of the companies actually that comes to mind when you mention that is the company that I currently work for. And we are running into those issues right now where it's the company grew very, very quickly. Went from, I don't know exactly the number, but it went from probably a couple hundred employees up to almost 1,000 very, very fast. So the issues that we ran into were the technology that we're using was not necessarily set up to support that. The systems and the processes that were in place were effective for a couple hundred people, but not so much for the shifting priorities and things when the company grows that fast. So, it was very challenging for, I think, everybody at the company. But really being able to sit down and, as you said, simplify, I think, is probably one of the most important ones. So I'm glad you mentioned that one first. Simplifying everything as much as you can. And that doesn't only help with the tools that you use. For example, CRM or a marketing automation tool like Marketo or Salesforce for the CRM there. Being able to simplify the processes that are contained within your tools, within your systems, is going to help you to simplify your process that you expect your employees to follow, right? So being able to simplify both of those down as much as you possibly can, number one, is going to help with the quality of your data in your system, which is really critical in this day and age. If you don't have data, or if your data is not top quality, I mean, it's worthless. It's completely worthless.
Well, absolutely. And data is one of the 6 key components of a business.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so the 6 key components that I work with are, number one is vision. Getting everybody in the organization on the same page about where the company's going and how it's going to get there. And that's not just sharing it with them, it's they buy into it.
Right.
Because that's the people you want.
Right.
Getting the right people in the right seat means people who agree with your values, know where you're going, and want to go with you. And the right seat means that they're capable of doing it. They get it, they want it, they're capable of, they have the capacity, the God-given capacity to do those kind of things. So you got vision, people, and then data. Getting that data in a way that takes away all the emotions, all the subjectivities, all the maybes and wants and hopes and dreams and all of that, but we're really looking at hard data on a regular basis. And so we have a scorecard that we look at every week about all the things that are important to get going. And then after we have a clear vision, we have the right people in the right seat, we have data that we agree with that's coming in on a regular basis, what's going to pop up in this transparent organization is all of the issues. And the degree to which a company can solve those issues quickly. You know, I've seen companies that had issues that were around for a week, a month, a quarter, a year, for a lifetime of businesses. But taking those issues, surfacing them, solving them, knocking them down forever, taking them out. That kind of ability to solve issues, not get caught up in talking about it forever until you run out of time or you just become uncomfortable, but actually having a process for solving them. So we got vision, we got people, we got data, issues, and then next we have process. Getting all of our processes documented, and then finally, I'll bet this might ring a bell with you, followed by all.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? This process that we got the best processes, we got them documented, and not ISO, thousands of pages, but 1 or 2 page for each process, so that we follow by all. We know the processes for our operations, for our HR, for accounts payable, for how we even deal with customers calling in. Getting those processes documented, followed by all. Trained, held accountable for all that. And then finally we come to traction, because vision without traction is hallucination.
Absolutely.
And traction means that we have created things that we call rocks, which means what are we going to accomplish? What are the things that have to get out of the way in the next 90 days in order for us to get to our big goals, to get to where we want to go in 10, 20, 30 years? And then meeting pulse. We meet every week to look at our scorecard. Are we on track with our scorecard? To look at, are we making progress with our rocks? Are we moving toward accomplishing those things we said we would accomplish in the next 90 days? And then, are there any things that we need to hear about customers or employees? And then the to-dos, accountability. Did we do what we said we would do last week? All these to-dos are only 7-day things. Get it done. We said we would. And then finally, after we have this time of reporting through the scorecard and the rock review and listening if there's any people issues that we have, and then the accountability of the to-dos, then we have time to take a look at the issues and actually solve issues. Do that every week. 90-minute meeting. Same day, same time, starts on time, ends on time.
Consistency.
Same agenda. That's the kind of thing that helps companies not only move beyond hitting the ceiling, but to thrive.
Exactly.
Right? That's what I want to help. So maybe we've got something to talk about.
Sure, of course. Yeah, it's it's interesting to me that you mentioned specifically systematizing things and the processes and all that, because I think that's something that gets overlooked more often than not. People think that you hire people. People think that you say, "Here's the product. Here's where we need to be," and then the process just happens.
Yes,
and it's
right.
it's not the case. Yeah. And it's we were talking about technology earlier, CRMs like Salesforce or any of the other myriad different ones that are out there, and marketing automation.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that comes along with that is not to map your process to your CRM, not to map your process to your tools that you get, but find the tools that you can map to your processes, to your systems.
That's right.
And I think that's really critical for a lot of businesses, because I think that people kind of see that from the opposite direction.
Right.
They say, great, we heard a lot of good things about Salesforce, we're going to buy that. Now, how do we fit into Salesforce?
Right.
Which is it can be dangerous,
Yes.
because what happens when you run into limitations?
Well, but you first have to know where you're going.
Right.
Right? This is
Have
where
a
we're
clear- a
going.
clear
This is
end-
how we're going to get there.
end state.
And what tools can we use to get there?
Right.
So, nobody won the Super Bowl by hoping.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that whole thing, when you talk about a company that is succeeding, a company that's thriving, they didn't get there by hoping, because hope is not a strategy.
It's not.
So we take the word hope and try out of our vocabulary. Well, Ian, this has been great conversation, and I know it's not going to be the last one. If someone wanted to talk with you, how would they make contact?
The best place to get a hold of me is primarily on LinkedIn. The URL for that is linkedin.com/in/Ian Plumlee. I also have my website. That's just ianplumlee.com. And then you can also shoot an email over to me at ian@ianplumlee.com. Any one of those ways is a great way to contact me.
Excellent, excellent. Anything that you want to talk to people across the world who are all in contact with us now?
Yeah, some parting words, I guess, would be just to, if you're running a marketing campaign, if you are running any kind of lead generation, if you're running any kind of marketing that's putting a message out into the world, ask yourself, well, what would my mother say if I said this to her? Ask yourself, is this something that I would appreciate somebody marketing to me with? Look at it that way, because it'll become much more clear what's a good strategy and what's not when you look at it through that lens. Being very intentional, being very ethical. My personal core values: honor, courage, and commitment. It comes out of the military, and those are three things that have driven every single action that I've taken in marketing.
What are the way again?
Honor, courage, and commitment.
Good.
So having the honor to do things the right way, to do things ethically, to do things in a way that's beneficial to people and not just to yourself. Having the courage to be that ethical individual and be the ethical marketer. And then commitment, being committed to your customers, being committed to your employees, being committed to innovation, being committed to doing the best job at whatever it is that you're doing.
Excellent. Ian, it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking with you again.
Thanks, Will.
So, this has been the Pilgrim on the 405, helping businesses in California thrive and helping business owners to get what they want from their business. This is the Pilgrim on the 405. Looking forward to talking with you again next week.
You've been listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. To hear more of the programs in this podcast, go to www.willchrist.com.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi.